Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about Trump's triple exclamation point affirmance that he intends to use the military to execute his biggest deportation operation in United States history. And not to assist, not logistically, but actually boots on the ground coming and grabbing supposed accused illegal immigrants and arresting them and putting them in the system to deport. This is a big friggin' deal, and the law is important and complicated. So stick with me, because this is going to be a real fight. Okay, point number one. We do not use the military in domestic law enforcement. It is an absolute bedrock principle of the justice system. It's enshrined in the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act, passed in the wake of Reconstruction after there were all these army troops fanning out in the conquered South. But it is very clear that the U.S. Army and everything was added then thereafter, Air Force, etc., they do not do domestic law enforcement. And it's not a sort of accidental proposition. Every developed democracy has the same principle. It's one of the stark dividing lines between democracies and autocracies, or authoritarian societies of the sort that Trump obviously wants to establish. The whole image, I mean, just imagine this, U.S. military troops in military garb coming into the community and grabbing accused immigrants. This is so the opposite of what criminal law enforcement is supposed to be, right? The military go out against foreign threats. They can kill them. They're at war. It's a whole different operation of national defense and protection. Domestic law enforcement, on the other hand, and come in and follow rules and get warrants, and people are arrested, but then a whole panoply of due process, and it's just a whole different system. And the separation between those two systems is just axiomatic and completely necessary to democratic functioning. Okay, that is the general principle, and that's expressed in the Posse Comitatus Act. There is the Insurrection Act, which basically says if there's insurrection happening or a total failure of state law enforcement, then you can use the military, but with a finding of Congress, or there are times when a president can do it quickly and has to do it quickly. I'll give you two examples. The 1992 riots after the acquittal in the first Rodney King case, there was complete bedlam and disorder and violence in Los Angeles. The LA cops were completely overmatched. And I actually was at the DOJ when we went through all the legal hoops to authorize the military to come in and quell that temporarily. Second example, Eisenhower in Little Rock. The local law enforcement either wouldn't or couldn't control the population in order to permit the federal mandate of 4 students integrating Little Rock, Arkansas, University of Arkansas, to occur. And so under this very limited principle of a failure of state law enforcement, the military was used. There's another principle which Trump used during the border wall in 2019, and I've also had some experience with the DOJ, and that is that the Army can do logistical assistance. In my case, it was the Unabomber case, and his co-conspirator, Tom Nichols, was hiding in the desert, and it was just beyond the capability of local law enforcement or even federal law enforcement to sort of find him. It was the kind of skill set that you needed military trained to fight in the desert would have, and they assisted logistically. That also happened in the border situation. That's okay. What is not okay is for, and what I know of no example of. You can also talk about putting down insurrection, literally insurrection, and orders that Lincoln made during the Civil War. But the notion of the Army or Air Force coming in to make what is basically the day-to-day bread and butter work of ICE, customs, and the domestic law enforcement agencies who work under constitutional safeguards. They are lesser for accused immigrants, but nevertheless they are safeguards. To instead have military in boots coming and doing that. That is just terrifying for starters. Think of the image of this, small town USA. Here comes Colonel blah, 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 ordering the military in. That's like wartime or coups or total autocracy, right? That happens in China. That happens in Russia. That does not happen in developed democracies. Oh, says Donald Trump, but we have an emergency. Two main points here. First of all, give me a break. Yes, we have a broken immigration system. We've had one for decades. We have ups and downs in entry over the southern border. We do not have, I don't think it would matter if we did, but we do not have the picture that he falsely propounded to the American people during the campaign of thousands of immigrants flooding the border and murderers going into Springfield and eating dogs, all that stuff. A, it's bullshit, but B, there's no demonstration that the normal domestic law enforcement can handle. Indeed, remember, we had this whole new statute, bipartisan, that Trump literally, we forget these things now because he just does one crazy thing after another. But remember, we had a bipartisan agreement to make things better, really bulk up enforcement, that he told the Republicans not to pass so he could say that there was a big problem here. And it was, in fact, his main talking point all through the election. It's not an emergency. Look, let's compare it to guns, okay? Gun that we now have. It's been rising repeatedly. There's 132 killings with guns, suicides and homicides every day in this country. That's like going up and up and up. Would that possibly justify Joe Biden sending in the army to take firearms away from people who didn't have the legal right to possess them, which is a total epidemic? The answer is clearly no. So the emergency is no emergency. It's the normal state of challenged and in many ways beleaguered and over-challenged and needing some help, like legislative help, domestic law enforcement. That's for starters. Second, this declaration of emergency, it's not really clear why that would even help him. The Insurrection Act does permit certain things with congressional findings to go forward, but there's no specific legal idea. Indeed, emergencies have become anything but exceptional in the last 30, 40 years, because you can declare them for all kinds of reasons, and presidents have, and you have to actually say they are done, and most presidents have not. So we have dozens of emergencies that are just out there. 9/11 is one, and I think there are maybe student loans. I mean, a lot of things that are just up. We've got real challenges in the country. That is not the same as we have a trigger for calling in the army and having them supplant federal law enforcement, domestic law enforcement, and the like. Now, possibly there's a line of political theory beloved by conservatives that gives sort of an inherent power to presidents, and there is some case law in the United States. The main case is the seizure of steel plants by Truman in the Korean War. And so some case law that says if the president does it with Congress's help and acquiescence, he's at the high ebb or his power. So maybe this is all a kind of gambit to get the Congress to agree and then put it on the strongest possible footing. But the law is, first, you cannot do it. Second, where you can do it, you need Congress's approval, you need insurrection, or you need failure of state law authority like 1992 Rodney King or mid-50s Little Rock. And third, there's no sort of free-floating emergency power. So we got a big fight ahead and a kind of typical Trump maneuver to just basically steamroll the Constitution, and not just the Constitution, this little provision, a really important norm that is just fundamental to democratic society and constitutional rule. You don't do domestic law enforcement by bringing in the army with boots on the ground unless you're an authoritarian regime. And that's really what he wants to take us a giant step towards. So this is a big friggin' deal. And more broadly, it's really, really ominous, the notion of the army coming in to do a massive deportation effort. It'll be fought hard in court. I don't see Trump having the powers normally, but it'll be a real test of whether the courts, acquiesce to him and sort of roll over. This is something big. And Trump says with triple exclamation points that it's happening. So stay tuned. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.